All right. Today, I wanted to film a new type of end of the year video for me. It was actually really fun to put together and I think really good to do as an exercise before the new year where I set new goals, intentions, all of that. Because most years since I've been on BookTube, I haven't actually felt the need to change things, look into things. I've felt good with where I was, but as I've talked about in a lot of my November content, I've been in a weird place reading wise, and it's a little bit of a slump thing, sometimes you gotta ride the slump, but I think also I feel the need to analyze, look at, see how my reading's gone, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what should I keep in my reading practice, what should I take out and adjust, etc. And so part of doing that is I went through on my Storygraph every month that I read this year. I looked at my average rating, I looked at how much I read, and I just looked through the books and thought of what stuck with me, positively or negatively. And you're going to see this the day before, I think it's alive. Joanna does the Why I Read series, and I've been invited to do it this week. So it's either going to be live on Tuesday at night, or it'll be recorded, and I'll share the link regardless whenever it happens. But this question of, why do you read? I'm thinking about that a lot right now. And I do think I consume stories for multiple reasons. I think that's everyone. Partially, it's for pleasure, it's for enjoyment, it's for entertainment. I want to be entertained. I want to be sucked into something for reasons. It doesn't have to be these magical science fiction places that I read all the time, but I like that. I like that escape, that entertainment. It's always been a cozy part of my life. I also like to read just because I like reading. I like when there's a writing style that just sucks me in. So even when I'm outside of my genre comfort zone, like literary, I don't mind being challenged. The challenge of reading a work can be fun. So I like the balance of just breezy, fun, I'm having a great time reads and challenging reads, and when a book is both, it's amazing. That said, I feel like I've read a lot of stuff that doesn't fit either category this year, and I've read more this year than I've ever read before. I still have plenty more weeks left. I'm sure I'll read even more, but as of now I'm at 152 books. I've never read that many, and I know for some people that challenge is fulfilling and fun. For me, I've decided this quantity game, it's not sustainable, and it's no longer fun. Even though there's always that urge to be there's so many stories I want to explore and consume, but time is a factor, and quantity is not meaning I'm finding quality all the time. And that is definitely something I noticed while I went through this list. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to briefly give a little snapshot of each month, January through November, talk about, star rating, how many books I read, what I noticed in a pattern in that month of what did or didn't work, and some highlights and lowlights in terms of books, and then we'll come back and discuss some things. So, January I had an average rating of 4.29, which when I looked through these is actually one of my higher rating months. I think actually it's tied for my highest rating month, which honestly in memory I would not have told you that. I don't think January was a bad month, but I would not have told you that. But I did notice this had a diverse selection in terms of genre and moods. When I looked at my Storygraph, I read 14 things, and I was doing a lot of knitting and audio. This is a couple months before my defense, so I am truly trying to escape. January is usually a month where I have better routine habits, so I was definitely probably also balancing real life stuff like yoga a bit more. So that's probably a little bit I'm going to be saying the word balance a lot, but I just do think balance is a big thing. Some of my highlights were The Paper Menagerie and Goliath, although Goliath was both a low light and a highlight, if you know. And I read Turning Darkness into Light in 2 days, which was a blast. That finished off my Lady Trent journey. I had a reread, and I do think that's another thing I noticed, that rereads, I need to find them more because I'm bad at mood reading. And sometimes when you're I really want a thing, and I don't really always know if a book's going to have the thing and then execute the thing the way I want it to, so I should just let myself reread books that I know have the thing. You know what I mean? It's not I'm not going to still be reading new books. I read over 30 new releases this year. I'm probably going to still be doing that. So I need to let myself reread more. Another low point for me was Malice, although I don't really know what I should have done with that. I think also maybe DNFing needs to be a thing I lean into more, which I know is a classic thing a bunch of booktubers say when they do these reflective things. But honestly, I knew a third halfway through that book that it wasn't vibing with me. And at least I have DNF'd the series mentally. I was thinking about going to Valor because of what everyone said, but I just think there's actually just a lot of trope stuff that just really isn't my thing. And but I didn't even spend that long reading it. I only read it for like 2 days. Like, it's a big book, but I spent like that part of the weekend doing that. But I could have spent that huge chunk of reading time reading something else. So I don't know. That's a thing that I'm reckoning with, because when I think of January and I look at all these things I read, I do think about how much work I put into some of my reading, and I don't think there was quite enough fun to balance that out. And that's what I think. It's like, I do like to challenge myself and push myself to read things that maybe aren't my thing. I think that's valuable for me. I don't think that everyone has to do that. I like that. But I also still need to have fun. So, yeah. February, we had a lower rating. That was a 4 rating. I read 12 things. I was pretty stressed and depressed at this point. I was like eve of defense. I was not okay. But what came to the rescue was Queens of Renthia. Oh my gosh, this was phenomenal. So that was a great audiobook thing while I was knitting. I also had the Olympics to watch, which was really fun. I also read The Vanished Birds this month, so that is a highlight. In terms of lowlights, we have Ancillary Justice and House of Sky and Breath, both of which I wanted to read and wanted to be new favorites. One I was hoping would be that escapist read, and the other one I was hoping would be a fun challenge. One was a challenge, but not fun, and the other one was not good for me in terms of escapism. So, in general, I think I probably should have DNF'd House of Sky and Breath, but it just felt so stupid that it wasn't being fun. And I don't know how to rationalize that. And then Ancillary Justice, I did have a book club. And that was another thing I was looking at when I was going through this, like, how many of my low points would be obligation reads, because I do a lot of obligation reads. Usually when I make my TBRs, I try to keep it at only half the TBR are obligation reads, whether that's local book club, any buddy reads, my patron stuff, and that typically does work, but I did want to, like, keep an eye on it. And so far, this is one of the first things where it's like, this was an obligation read, but it was also on one of my own, like, internal series to start in 2022 videos. So, yeah, and I was just really hoping the ending would be good payoff. So I don't regret not DNFing Ancillary Justice, but I was bummed. March was the lowest, I think. Was this the lowest reading month in terms of rating? No. That comes. This is a 3.93 average rating. But this was the defense month. And, you know, even though it was a low rating, like, the lows were lows, the highs were high. Okay, so I don't think of this month as a bad reading month. I think of it as a really weird life month, and it was a time. But, like, it had Crossroads of Twilight and it had The Story of Minnalee, neither of which I like. Those are, like, some of my rare 2.5 star books. Don't enjoy those. But it did have Chorus of Dragons. Like, I read 3 Chorus of Dragons books that month, and that's, like, one of my new all-time favorite series. So, like, that was pretty great. I read The Love Hypothesis in, like, a day, which was, like, a solid use of my time. Like, that is a good book memory. Because that's another thing is, like, I'm trying to track, is, like, what were my good book memories? Because I like having memories. I don't need to remember every moment in a book, but I want to remember how I felt reading the book. Like, that's the nostalgia I want to take with me. So, yeah. We had 5 below 4 stars, but we also had 4 5 stars. March wasn't too bad, all things considered. I think April is an example of where I mean the quantity was too much. This was, I think, the Aurelian Magical Readathon, which I do love participating in. I think it's so fun. But there are just so many prompts to complete if you want to complete all of them, which you don't have to. That's just a little thing my brain did because I was trying to go through my physical TBR. And I did get through quite a bit of it. And basically what I took from this month, when I was even looking, because it was like a 4.03 star month, I read 17 books. My highlight was my middle game reread, which I loved. I loved rereading Middle Game that weekend. That was great. Again, why I need to prioritize rereads. I enjoyed Kaikei. My low point was like Shadows of the Short Days, but I was only like a 3 star. But I read 14 other books, and when I looked, I had nothing worth saying about them. I just read a whole lot of 3.5 to 4 star books. Like, and it's not like a bad thing, and I read a bunch of stuff on my physical TBR, but like, I should have DNF'd Shadows of the Short Days. I should have DNF'd the other Einstein. Like, there were so many books that I shouldn't have kept going with, not because they were bad, but because I have no memories. It was obviously, in my head, not something worth keeping. And like I said, I don't need to remember what's in the book. I need to remember how I felt consuming it. Because that's part of why I read, is to form these emotional memories with moments in my life. Like, that's why I consume stories. So this was the first sign to me where it's like, yeah, quantity is not the game. Because this is also my highest page number read. Like, it wasn't just books. This was a lot of pages. So that was the first thing. May, we get back down to more normal numbers. In May, I graduate. I go to New Orleans. I get COVID. I'm about to move. May's a lot. May, I'm shocked, is a 4.04 star rating, which is about the same as April. And highlights, Nettle and Bone, Discord of Gods, obviously. Low light was Burnt Sugar. Challenging book that I did not regret reading was Ballad of Perilous Graves. So, like, I think all of my low points were actually a bunch of life stuff. Like, I don't think the books were negatively affecting me, and I do think I didn't have enough wiggle room in my mental schedule to let myself completely abandon my TBR. I actually still stuck to my TBR. Why? Who knows? No one's keeping score. Nobody but me cares. There was like one obligation read that I had to read, but otherwise, I could have done what I wanted. Like, I think I needed to read Parable of the Sower when I had COVID. That was it. And that wasn't bad. I listened to that while I did, like, a jigsaw puzzle once I was healthy enough. There was nothing else I had to do. There were some buddy reads, but all of my friends would have understood. Why did I make myself read if I didn't want to read? Or why didn't I just reread a bunch of stuff? I don't know. Like, consuming entertainment was actually really hard for me at the end of May. But I don't know why I approached it. And, like, all of this also leads into June. This all is the same for June, because June is also COVID continues, I move, and that is my lowest number of books. I read 9 books, 4-star average rating. The highlight was Lachlan's. I freaking loved Lachlan's. Lachlan's reminded me, oh yeah, reading is so entertaining and fun. This is great. That's what I want captured, like, all the time. And I always do say Robert Jackson Bennett is, like, my go-to for, like, my version of plot-based sort of stuff. Like, he does plot-based things in a way that I enjoy them. Things that weren't lowlights, but, like, I really need to figure out how to handle when I get kind of stuck. And that was Fool's Errand and The Grace of Kings. Now, I really like The Grace of Kings, and I want to continue on. And Fool's Errand is not a bad book, but it took me like a month and a half to read. And both of them, I spent more time reading it than I would like to, and part of that was out of the control of the book. I was really not in a reading headspace. But again, why didn't I let myself actually just completely pause them, put them down, and pick them up at a later date? I could have done that. There were no rules. There were literally no rules. There were no obligations. I wasn't in a live show. These were instances where my own internal obligations overrode common sense. Because if you notice, again, I've been keeping track of, like, if obligation reads were low points. So far, it's just me. So, yeah, it's that Taylor Swift song, Antihero. Yeah, it's me. I refuse to sing it right now. But yeah, I'm the problem. But low points were also Foreigner, which was my own internal obligation. Like, I was buddy reading that with people in the Discord, but it was on my series to start in 2022. I wanted to try it out. I wanted to try out a more challenging classic sci-fi. And it wasn't really so much challenging, it just wasn't my style, and I didn't let myself DNF it. I think part of it was I bought the audiobook and it was a buddy read. Who knows? And then Seasonal Fears is not my fault. I really wanted to like Seasonal Fears. That was the book's fault. So we're halfway through the year. Things are not great, and we haven't exited our low point because July was the worst reading month. July, I read as many books as I did in April, but most of them were novellas, so it's not as big of a page number. And my average rating was 3.88. Now, this is when I did my novella project, and my novella project is not why this rating's low. I actually, sorry if you're hearing the cat. He's heard me talking. Poo-Tao, you want to come in here? Yes, come on. All right, maybe he'll be quiet. Maybe if I pet him, he'll be okay. But I liked doing the novella project. It was an average of like 4-star reads, but that was fine, and it was fun for me. Like, that was a fun time. Far Sector was a highlight. The Past is Red, which was a novella I read. Circe was a really fun reread. Again, that's a moment I remember with joy. I was just listening to Circe, which I read it the first time, was having a really fun time because I was reading it for my book club, which was an obligation, sort of thing. And I remember fondly doing chores on a Sunday morning reading Circe. So who knows? And then Project Hail Mary was like a fun memory. That was a book I was not going to pick up except for my Hugo project. And again, it was a very engaging time. I wanted to listen to the audiobook. Now, there were many low points. Blood Trials, Reign and Ruin, Gollum and the Ginny. Gollum and the Ginny, again, was my own personal problem. I was gifted that book. I really felt like I needed to finish it because a close friend of mine gave it to me, but it really wasn't like my thing. No, it wasn't my thing. It was historical fantasy. Like, I would have preferred literary. Poo-Tao. So, like I was saying, Gollum and Ginny, not really my thing. But Blood Trials, I should have DNF'd again. I think Blood Trials and The Gauntlet of Ginny is because I owned them, and I think once I own a book, I really feel like finishing it. I mean, we can pretend that's the rule, but I do this with library books too. Once I start reading it, I feel the need to finish. And Reign and Ruin was a patron buddy read, so that was an obligation. But again, it's not like the actual obligations have been causing problems here. Now, we leave the low point. That's the lowest point to the highest of the high points. August was the best. And you know what I did in August? I DNF'd books. I made plans for readathons and threw them out the window to read what I wanted to read. Shocking, I know. And also, it was the new release-a-thon run by Kristen. And I like new releases a lot, and most of my favorites from that month were new releases. Burning Kingdom sequel. Light from Uncommon Stars is not a new release, but it came out like the year before. Strange and Stubborn Endurance. I also really loved reading Build Your House Around My Body, which I think came out the year before. Like, I was reading a lot of modern releases I was excited about. Also, Build Your House Around My Body was an obligation that really worked out. And I really liked The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers, which was surprising, because kind of like Project Hail Mary, not a book I would have picked up, but my Hugo projects were really fun. And those were things I just chose to do for myself and weren't a negative decision on my reading. Did not make me slumpy, actually did the opposite. So I don't think I need to stop like just randomly doing projects as I want to. So that was a 4.29 star rating month, 12 books, so that tied with January. And I think January I read 14 books, but I think August was my strongest month. If I had to have been asked, that's what I would have said. Now, September was a 4.06. I read 16 things, and this was also a case of mental health was also rough. I was very much in a limbo position. Life's been a little all over the place. I didn't know how to relax, and I didn't know what I needed to do. There was a lot going on. And then I also did a TBR swap with Evie, and Evie did the right thing. When Evie wasn't feeling like reading the books that I gave her to read, she DNF'd them. Which is totally fine. We joke back and forth about how she didn't finish the list and everything like that, but it's like, that's completely fine. I read all of them because none of them were bad. This, if you look at the bell curve for my ratings, this has the most 4-star books ever. And like, my 4 stars are my like, what I expect from a book. So it doesn't, like, it means it's a good book, but it doesn't mean it's phenomenal. It doesn't mean it's a favorite. I just tend to think that was not a difficult book to read, and it was good. That's what I give 4 stars. But for me, a 4-star is kind of an average book, if that makes sense. I know a lot of people make average books 3 or 3 stars, but it is what it is. I grade on a curve or something like that. And so I had 11 4 stars, and I don't have much to say about a lot of them. So yeah, I guess the highlights were Shadows of Self, which I read in like a day. That was a fun memory. Delilah's here now. My cats are just really wanting to be here today. Delilah, you don't want to be on camera. You're going to knock the camera over. She's not normally around. If you see a crack and tail, that's right. But Love in the Brain was a really fun memory. Fairy Tale, a surprising delight. I had to drive back and forth because I was house sitting for someone, and it was a great audiobook to have on the road. My low point was Sweetness of Water, and this was an obligation read that I could not DNF, which was unfortunate because I totally would have. That one wouldn't have been hard. It's not in my genre. Yeah. And now we get into October, which is going up, and it was a more fun reading month. I felt that, and the rating was a 4.11. I was diverse in genres. I tend to be that way in October. So in October, I tend to read more horror. I tend to switch between sci-fi and fantasy. I think part of that is also I typically am trying to read more Latinx works because of Latinx and Heritage Month and everything like that. And so on one side, all my 5 stars were rereads. So not amazing, didn't find new favorites. But on the other side, I had Spear Cuts Through Water and The Hacienda, which were phenomenal reads. On the slightly negative side, I have Genesis of Misery, which, why didn't I DNF that book? I don't know. I kept thinking it would be better, and I was curious. But pretty much from the halfway point on, I should have stopped. Personally, shouldn't have kept going. So if the camera's a little bit different, my cat knocked it over, which is a first, but, you know, it's been 3 years, so first time for everything. I think I was just talking about how I need to DNF things more, like I've said like 80% of this video. So the last month we'll look at is November, a 4-star rating month. My anticipated releases came through. That's like a thing I talked about in my 2022 tier ranking of new releases. My new releases choices for myself were generally good. They were generally on point. I also had great surprises with like Symbiosis and Terraform. I did a cozy mystery reading vlog, which I thought was great for my mental health, and I enjoyed again. That was another like project I wanted to do that wasn't bad for me. I enjoyed doing that. But the slump is definitely here. The slump has been around. The slump has been hard to maneuver. And I also had this struggle because I had to read this book that I knew I would hate the ending, but I had to read it for book club. So this one is an obligation, but this one is kind of on me because I am in charge of nominating the books that people vote on for my local book club. And I had read a Helen Oyeyemi, and I, based off that one book, didn't realize she has a really troublesome interaction with queer representation in her books. And Boy Snow Bird has a pretty transphobic twist ending, which, you know, is like my least favorite trope. Like, I mean, I hate that it's a trope. Like, goodness, think of other things. But I knew that starting at the beginning, and then it was also paired with the fact that it is like, I really love her writing style. So it was this dichotomy of enjoying what I was reading, but knowing things were going to be bad. And then when they were bad, they were bad. Like, there was not a lot of hand waving I could do. I mean, yeah. So that was a low point. But in general, I think what I've learned here is balance, right? Like, I need to have a good balance of things that are engaging and fun and entertaining with also my challenges. I love making lists. I love planning. I can't become a mood reader because I don't know my mood like 99% of the time. And like I was saying at the top of this, maybe when I need to deviate to my mood, I need to pick up one of these books that brings me joys on my shelves, like let myself reread it and stop thinking about, well, you could be doing this, 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 or this, and then suddenly I don't do anything for 2 hours, which is also okay. I can also just let myself do nothing. And I think that's another thing I need to work on, is not needing to fill every space as efficiently as possible in my life. So we'll see. But this is, I think, a really good exercise for myself, hopefully interesting at all to you guys, about just like what worked and didn't work well for me this year in my reading, because it's going to really, I think, help me compile my thoughts and my intentions and goals for the next year when I post that video early in January. Let me know anything you noticed in your reading this year, things that you liked, didn't like, etc. Let me know if you even liked this video and want more chatty things like this. I know this one was particularly chaotic once the cats entered, so thanks for sticking through me with that, whatever editing Angela had to do. And if you want to leave an emoji, leave a calendar emoji, because we kind of, went through the whole year. And otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.